Hi, my name is Andrew Levie, and this is the story of how I became Orthodox. I think where it really all began, well, actually, let me cut it. So, I was raised Protestant. My parents are both Protestants. I was raised Protestant my entire life. I mean, I didn't really question it, like I didn't really struggle with it for a while, but pretty much I'd say when I got into my teen years, like really, I'd say 15, 16 years old, I really just kind of started to question. Well, actually, I had more of an existential crisis. I started asking myself, is there really a God? Is there really, what is the meaning of life? The big question, right, that everyone always asks. I started drifting away from Christianity a lot, and so much so that I actually almost became entangled in the New Age movement. I almost got into that stuff, and looking back on it, I'm just thinking, wow, you almost went down a really straight path. But I almost got entangled into the New Age movement. But I think God, I want to say that God saw that I was about to head down this path, and he said, okay, I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to not give you the full truth right away, but I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you some road signs to tell you, like, hey, kind of, turn this way, or this speed limit. I started just seeing just a lot of videos. I never searched this stuff, but I started seeing a lot of videos online that I didn't even search for. They just popped up, and it was like, oh, this validates the Bible, or here's archaeological discoveries that validate the Bible, or here's atheist historians and scholars that validate the Bible, and not just the Bible, but Christianity itself. It's like, oh, so like we know Jesus existed. We know that there were hundreds and hundreds of witnesses that he had, not just before his crucifixion, but they bore witness to him breathing and being alive after his crucifixion. And so a lot of evidence to back up the validity of the Bible. And I also started hearing a lot about near-death experiences, right? About not just people who have died and come back, but people who, almost had come close to death, typical stuff, right? But it wasn't so much the experience itself, it was more of what happened. And in almost all the instances, they say, oh, there was a man in a robe, or there was a man in a robe and he was reading from this book. And then I thought, that's Jesus reading from the book of life. And one of them was from a Hindu that said that. He was raised Hindu, and he said, yeah, I think it was a man, I think it was Jesus, and he wasn't associating Christianity with any way. And so that really boosted my confidence in the faith. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Shroud of Turin, but the Shroud of Turin, I think the Shroud of Turin was what finally like made it all fall in place for me, because it is the most studied religious artifact in human history. And it's still being studied to this day, and in fact, they're still discovering more and more about it. And I look at that, I feel and I know that, oh my, this is Jesus, like that's his face. I'm sure you've seen the picture, the world famous picture of that reverse image of the Shroud of Turin, but I look at it and I know it literally looks like the stereotypical, I don't want to really say stereotypical, but it is really the face of Jesus. And no scientist can explain how it got that way naturally. And so that was really the final piece that put it together for me, where I thought, okay, this is it, Christianity, this is the truth for me. But then really, okay, so it's Christianity, but what is the truth and word of God? And I started just pondering, like, what church is really the church of Jesus and the church of God? So I was already well aware of the existence of Orthodoxy. I love history. I grew up loving history. I mean, so much so when I was a little child, I always said, oh, I'm going to be an Egyptologist when I grow up. I'm going to discover, lost ancient tombs never before seen by man, right? And I love history. And, what goes hand in hand with history? Well, religion. And so as I'm studying religion, I'm looking at Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, all of it. But I look and I see Orthodox Christianity, and I have some idea of what it is. I see the icons, I see the rituals, I see all of it, but of course I don't understand any of it. And I didn't really start asking questions about it until I was thinking, well, what is the church that I'm to belong to, right? But I'd say the big person who's really responsible, not responsible, but a huge reason as to why I became Orthodox is my grandfather. He's the only Orthodox Christian that's in our family, and he was the one who I started asking all my questions to, like, oh hey, like why do we do this, right? What do these icons mean? What is it? Why do we light candles when we enter the sanctuary? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And he started answering all these questions, and I thought, okay, well maybe he'll answer my questions, but I probably won't jive with it very much. But everything he explained to me, I thought, wow, this actually makes sense. This actually doesn't seem crazy, because I always thought, okay, well, Orthodoxy, it's old, it's ancient, it doesn't, it's probably not something that's for everybody because it's not with the times, right? But I started coming to the realization that religion is not supposed to be, or I say religion, but I think the Word of God and His Word is not meant to correspond to the times. The times are supposed to correspond to the Word of God. And I just started kind of coming to that realization. And I'm looking at Orthodoxy and I'm thinking, okay, well, this church is thousands of years old. It was the first church, because I knew that Roman Catholicism split off from it, and Protestantism within Catholicism. So I knew that, okay, well, there's 2,000 years of history here, relatively unchanged. There's something here. There's something here that there's something here, right? And I asked my grandfather all these questions, but I'd say nothing really like stuck with me until I asked him to take me to a liturgy. And I just asked him, like, hey, did you take me to a liturgy? He was like, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So he took me to a liturgy, and it was a Russian Orthodox church. Not all of it was in Church Slavonic. Some of it was in English. I'd say most of it was in English. Some of it was in Slavonic, but I understood most of it was going on, right? So just the second I stepped in the door, my jaw was just like, I was just blown away by everything. And I just felt like the worship, or not the worship, but like the worship and everything that was taking place, I just felt like we were truly glorifying God. And I just thought, this is it. This is what, like, it's just all, like, the years of me, like, asking questions, me doing my research, and I finally get here, and it just all clicked for me right at that moment. I was just like, this is it. This is it. Obviously, I was really anxious to get into it, but I just walked away with even more questions, right? I think that's the one thing about Orthodoxy is the second you step your toe into that pool, you just walk away with even more questions than when you first stepped in, right? And but I was still anxious. I was just eager to learn so much more about it. And so I asked even more questions to my grandfather. I start going to more liturgies, and I sit in on more services, and then I finally came here, and I asked Charlie, who's the subdeacon who's at this church. I asked him, I wanna like, how do you, I want to be Orthodox. Like, I want to be a part of this church. And he said, oh, well, you've got to be a catechumen. And I was like, okay, where do I start? And he, started me down that path, and here I am now, after weeks, months of trying to figure it all out, still figuring it out. My godparents, when you're baptized into the church, you have godparents to sponsor you in, and what my godfather said, I think is a perfect meaning, or not meaning, but it's a perfect sentence to describe what it means to be Orthodox. He said, I've been Orthodox for 20 years and I'm still learning. There's always something else to learn. And I mean, it makes sense. Like, this church has stood for 2,000 years, and I mean, even the church fathers themselves, Saint John Chrysostom himself, I'm sure, had many more questions and much more he wanted to learn in his last days. And that's a big thing about being Orthodox, is there's always something to learn.
What was the number one thing that you would say changed in you from before you became Orthodox to after you became Orthodox?
If I had to say what the number one thing is that changed within me prior to being Orthodox and afterwards, I think it's just, I'd say the biggest change was the thirst and just the hunger to want to know more about who God is and further developing that relationship with him. That's not something I particularly had very strongly prior to being Orthodox. I had that desire, but I just felt like the seed wasn't properly there enough to allow that seed to grow and for me to further develop that relationship with God. And I think that is the biggest change, is upon coming into Orthodoxy, I want to truly develop this relationship with God and his son, Christ.
What would you say to someone who is in a very similar position that you were in, right? When you were 15 years old and you were in kind of that crisis of faith, coming from a Protestant background, not 100% sure, and not even familiar with what Orthodoxy is to begin with. They're only just beginning to dip their toes in the water. What would you say to your younger self?
I would just say, the biggest thing I would say is be patient. Okay, like be patient. This isn't something that's going to happen right away. Many people spend years or even decades before they figure out where they truly spiritually need to be. And that's the one thing. If I would say that to my younger self, I would just say, just give it time. Be patient. Keep thirsting for knowledge. Keep wanting to grow, but just know that it's not going to happen right away. If I had to say why it's so important to be patient, I mean, I guess it's just because we all want answers right away, right? That's what it like. That's I think a big flaw about being human is whenever we have questions, and especially questions we are very anxious to have answered right then and there, we just immediately do away with patience. And being a Christian, but even being Orthodox, I think you have to have patience, but you have to have faith that it's all that your prayers and your questions will be answered with time. And I still have my questions, but a lot of my questions have been answered.
I think that's a good gist of it. So unless there's anything else that you want to add or say?
There is actually one thing I want to say. I want to say something to those who have heard about Orthodoxy, or they're curious about it. Like they've heard of it, but they're not 100% certain. Oh, is this something that I want to? Is this something that I want to be a part of? Or a lot of people who I talk to about Orthodoxy, when they've heard about it, they think, oh, they're very strict, they're very judgmental, and that really saddens me that a very wide view of Orthodox Christianity to the general public is they think, oh, we're very strict and very judgmental. They think that if somebody walks through the door, they're going to think, oh, they don't know what it means to be Orthodox. I can tell you that at this church here, that is absolutely not the case. Most of us here are converts, and I tell everyone who asks me about being Orthodox, I say, no one here is going to judge you. No one's going to stare at you if you don't do this. No one's going to stare at you if you don't go up for communion. No one's going to stare at you. No one's going to judge you if you don't venerate the icons. Absolutely nobody. You can just stand there and just observe. And we encourage people to do that. We just say, just come in and just experience the full breadth of liturgy. Don't I know people will have their fears, but just don't have any fears. Because we were all in their shoes at one point. We were all that anxious, confused person walking through the door at the first time. It's like, wow, what is all of this? So we all understand what that means. So if you have any fears about being judged or any fears that you'll stand out, don't worry about it, because we were all there at one point.